Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everyone to Central Baptist Church this morning. It was going to be a really busy weekend with quiz night, with a baptism, with a kopo, and unfortunately all that has had to be rescheduled with us being in lockdown. So stay tuned, we'll let you know when all those things are going to be taking place.
Morena Church whānau, just remember at 10:30 today there is a Facebook Live for our young ones.
Awesome, well enjoy church this morning, grab a cup of tea, wear your slippers, get comfortable, enjoy it.
Ka kite.
Ka kite anō.
Hi there Central Baptist, we've got Nick and Sarah here for our Fast Five. What's one thing on your bucket list?
Well, I've actually just managed to tick something off my bucket list, and that was performing in Les Mis, which I got to do last month.
And I'd like to go to Disneyland.
What's your favourite personal or family tradition?
One family tradition that we've got is we have our holidays around Christmas and New Year up in Punakaiki. So we always have a big get together with the family, and we've got lots of special things that we like to do there, walks and canoeing and all kinds of bits and pieces. That's always a really special family time.
What's some of the best advice you've ever received?
One that often pops into my head is my dad, who used to say to us often as kids, a paraphrase of 1 Samuel 2:30, God honours those who honour him. And it often reminds me to always make the right choice, even if that's a hard one.
And my advice isn't so timeless. It's just one that I've kind of had in my head over the past few months, and it's also a bit of a paraphrase, but it's if you need to eat a frog today, do it first thing in the morning.
Other than Jesus, which famous person in history would you like to spend a day with?
Or maybe Steve Jobs, or a kind of inventor like Isaac Newton or Benjamin Franklin, or Nikola Tesla, Leonardo da Vinci, someone like that maybe.
And for me, I think it would be King Solomon. I'd love to hear more of his wisdom and also be able to see the temple and all his riches and the things that sound pretty amazing in the Bible.
What do you love about Jesus?
One part of Jesus' character that I really like is the way that he's able to sort of communicate truth with really high grace, and just the way that he's able to speak to people and correct them, but just do it with so much love and grace. I think that's really amazing.
And I love the way that he loves and accepts all of us, regardless of who we are and what we've done.
Thank you, Nick and Sarah, for today's Fast Five.
Over the years as a pastor, I've heard many people confess to things, but I've never had anyone confess to being greedy. We began a series 2 weeks ago on heart killers: anger, guilt, greed, and jealousy. The issue with greed is that it's actually a silent heart killer. We're not aware of it. It doesn't make itself obviously known. We know if anger is an issue. We can feel guilt gnawing away at us. Jealousy is obvious, but greed, no, not so much. It disguises itself. A couple of years ago during lockdown, actually, I read Andy Stanley's book, Enemies of the Heart, that this series is based on, and it was the chapters on greed that I felt most uncomfortable with. Maybe I should have got Jeremy to do this. Anyway, guilt says, I owe you. Anger says, you owe me. Greed says, I owe me. What's mine is mine because I've earned it. And behind greed is always fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of missing out, fear of losing everything. How do we diagnose in greed if it's so hidden? We can often see it in other people, but we almost can never see it in ourselves. So I've come up with 11 signs that maybe greed has got a hold of your heart. Now remember, it's very hard to self-diagnose, so you have to be ruthlessly honest. Sign number 1 is maybe you worry about money a lot. You talk about money a lot. Number 2 sign is your garage and cupboards are overflowing with stuff that you've not used for a long time. I can see some of you squirming. Thirdly, you find it hard to share your stuff with anyone else. 4th, you talk as if you've just got enough to get by. 5thly, you're spending more than you earn. That is, you've got stuff on credit. You're buying in advance. 6th, you don't feel content with what you have. You're always looking to what you could get. You give reluctantly and not very cheerfully. Number 8, I think it is, you keep trying to make more money. Overtime or whatever, but possibly the rest of your life is falling apart. Number 9, you ignore people you could help and you have little empathy for those in need. Number 10, you're really stingy or really loose with money, or possibly both. So you're stingy over small things, but then you extravagantly buy other things. And number 11, sign of greed in your heart is you don't express gratitude very often. If you tick more than one of these items on this list, then maybe greed is in your heart and you're in denial. Greed can be an issue for all people. Poor people can be greedy. Rich people can be greedy. It's not a financial issue, it's a heart issue. Because when a greedy person gets more money, they don't become less greedy. Greed is not about our finances, it's about our heart. Luke chapter 12, we read of someone calling out to Jesus, "Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate." Jesus said, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things?" Then he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." Why do we need to guard our heart? Because greed is subtle, it's not obvious. Jesus said life is not measured by how much you own. For a greedy person, their stuff is an extension of themselves. So if something happens to their stuff, you damage their stuff, then you're hurting them. And behind greed, as we said, is fear. So this man is fearful he won't get his share of the inheritance. He fears not having enough. The fear is that God can't or will not take care of him. Or maybe he'll take care of him, but not to the level that he wants to be cared for. And that gap is a source of anxiety. So to provide a sense of security, the person wants to get more. The problem for those with greed is there's never enough to feel secure. Stuff provides a level of security, but it's never enough for the heart. And that's what they fear, and so it begins this cycle. The greedy person never has a sense of peace. Because if God won't or can't care for them, then who will? Now, after Jesus tells us to guard against every kind of greed, he tells a story. He tells a story about a farmer. The farmer has one of those seasons where everything just goes right. There's not too much rain or too little rain. There's not too much sun. It's just perfect. It's one of those seasons. And he has this bumper crop. It's much better than normal season. In fact, it's so extravagant that his barns are not big enough. And this man thinks, look at all my hard work. It's paid off. He never considers that God has blessed him. He just thinks, I've earned it. He never considers that God has blessed him so he could help others. He just thinks, I've earned it, I deserve it, it's mine to spend. So he thinks, I'm going to build some bigger barns. And I'm sure he could justify it. Maybe next season will be bad. Andy Stanley says this fascinating statement. He says, greed is always looking for something good to hide behind. Maybe it'll help the kids' education. Maybe it'll help with my pension. Maybe it's just being prudent. This man says, I'm going to retire early. But he runs out of time. He's got lots of stuff, but he's going to run out of time because God tells him he's going to die that night. See, not only is our time in God's hands, but actually our money is as well. The story ends with the question, who's going to get this man's stuff? Well, not him. He's dead. Someone else will, but not because he's generous, but because he's not around. He's dead. And that's a sobering thought. It's only a matter of time before someone else will get all your stuff. Jesus actually defines greed differently from us. He says, he is a person who's a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. What does it mean, a rich relationship with God? Well, it means rich towards God. in some translations. It's talking about a lifestyle of generosity. A greedy person saves carefully, but then gives sparingly. A greedy person sees it as his right to use his wealth for himself. Jesus says a greedy person is a fool. I want you to imagine for a minute, you can do it in real life if you want, but just imagine for a minute you to write a list of all the stuff that you owned. What would it look like? I imagine for most of us it would be quite long. When I was single in my 20s, all I had could fit in one room. Now I have a house and a shed. Often our focus is on the stuff we don't have, and that's the power of advertising. It makes us think about all the stuff we'd like but don't have. We often fail to look at what we do have. I want to make a fair bet, a fair chance that the list that you wrote or can imagine writing would be bigger than the list your grandparents would have written. I think there's a very high chance that the list you might write would be more than actually most people in the world. Check out the internet. Most sites have New Zealand in the top 10 countries for the amount of stuff we have. So why do you have what you have? Why has God given it to you and He could have given it to someone else? Why do we have more than we need? Why? Maybe it's to help others in need. You see, we've said the key to stopping the 4 heart killers is to develop 4 habits. We said that guilt is conquered by confession, anger is conquered with forgiveness. How is greed conquered? Greed is conquered by generosity, because generosity breaks the grip of greed on our hearts. Now immediately we think, well, I would be generous if I just had a little bit more. And that is a lie, an absolute lie, because we never reach that point. Years ago I went door to door collecting for the Salvation Army, and all collectors at the end commented that the poorer the house or the neighbourhood, the more generous they were. Over and over again it happened. We all have more than we need. God has given us more than we need so we can be generous. We have to cultivate a habit of giving, so the first thing that comes to mind when we maybe get a bit of extra money is, who can I help with this money? Not what can I get with this money. Now I confess my first thought to get a bit extra money is, what can I do with it? Maybe I can upgrade my tennis racket. I could get another tool. Guys at Demolition have these reciprocating saws. They're great. Maybe you could go on holiday. Clearly I have some work to do. The first thing I should think of is, God, who can I help with this money? The issue is not having money. The issue is why you've been given what you've been given. Well, sure, maybe you worked hard, maybe you invested wisely, maybe you got an inheritance, maybe you just had some good luck. It doesn't really matter how it came to you. The question is, why has God given you this money? It's not yours. It's not yours. It's been given to you by God to manage. The silent heart killer. We can't see. If we do get a glimpse of it, we go into denial. We look at how much other people have. We justify it in our minds. Yet Jesus said that greed is a sin. Often in the West we've fixated in the church on sexual sin and ignored the fact the Bible speaks a lot about the dangers of greed and money. Jesus says greed chokes out spiritual vitality. Think of the story of the sower and the seed. The seed, that's the word of God, was choked out by the cares and worries of the world. The problem is the more stuff we have, the more stressed we get, not the less stressed. The more stuff there is to break down or go missing or maintain or replace. I want to challenge you, honestly do the greed test again. The 11 signs of greed at work in your heart. And if you take more than one thing, admit to the possibility that greed could be at work in your heart. I want to end by giving 5 suggestions of things you could do to cultivate a habit of generosity. First is, you're in lockdown, do a spring clean of anything you've not used for a year. Give it to a charity. Lots of great op shops that would really benefit. Declutter. Number 2, create space in your budget for giving. If your budget is that tight that there's no room for spontaneous giving or regular giving, then it's not going to happen. Create space in your budget for giving. Number 3, increase your committed regular giving. It's very easy just to set it years ago at a level and it's going out from your bank account. Think about increasing that level, just slowly, year by year. Number 4, practice daily thanksgiving for all God has given you. Get into the habit of giving thanks, recognizing that all that you have comes from God and is His. 5thly, pray this prayer regularly. God, who can I help with what you've given me today? Who can I help with what you've given me today? Pray that prayer. You'll begin to deal with greed. My prayer is each of us would examine our hearts for the silent heart killer and then have the courage to begin to take action. May God bless.